I was here, I just wasn't being accepted into the group. My request was answered slowly.
It didn't pop up, sorry.
Okay,
Normally it pops up in the middle of the screen.
I think we're good to go, guys.
You all set, Terry?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. In accordance with an act to implement provisions necessary to the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens of Maine in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency, as enacted to read Section G-11 MRSA 403-A, public proceedings to remote access during declaration of state of emergency to COVID-19, and for 30 days following the termination of the state of emergency, the Curriculum Committee meeting will be held through Google Meet. This meeting will be live streamed and available for viewing at www.msad11.org. Members of the public wishing to make comment prior to the board meeting were invited to send an email to schoolboard@msad11.org by Monday, July 12th at 4 p.m. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 4:36. Angela, will you please take the roll call first, calling Curriculum Committee members?
Matt Marshall,
I'm here.
Veronica Babcock,
Here.
Nancy Fortier-Brown,
Here.
Teresa Garrett,
Here.
Nicole Medor,
Here.
Matthew Lillibridge.
Matthew messaged me that he had an unexpected emergency and is not going to be able to attend this evening,
Okay.
and sent his apologies.
Typically, any member of the board may attend board committee meetings, even if not assigned. I almost always do, as does the majority of my fellow board members. Angela, could you read through the remaining members of the board and record whether they're present or not?
Sure. Becky Fless,
Here.
James Lothridge, Cullen McGow,
Present.
Patrick Saucier, Alyssa Tracy, Tony Veet,
Here.
Peregrine Bolduc Ignatiuk.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Becky,
you.
I'd like to turn it over to you for a board chair statement.
Thank you. It has come to our attention, I have a written statement because I can be wordy. So it's come to our attention that the community is concerned about public access to the meetings. Since the onset of the pandemic, the board moved from in-person meetings 16 months ago to virtual meetings using the Google Meets platform and live streaming all meetings through YouTube. Links to the live streamed meetings were posted under live feed on the MSAD11 school board page. On June 30th, Governor Mills ended the state of emergency in Maine in accordance with the law 1-MRSA 403 Section A. Schools may continue to hold meetings virtually until 30 days after the end of the civil emergency. The new legislation, LD 32, Chapter 290, expressly states that 403A governs remote participation in public meetings until it is automatically repealed 30 days after the termination of the state of emergency declared by the governor. Additionally, through the 16-month virtual process, we learned that the virtual format has provided greater access to our community, resulting in significantly more public participation than strictly in-person meetings have ever experienced in MSAD11. Participation was monitored routinely through email, use of Top Chat at full board meetings, and follow-up communication from board meetings citing the video meeting or video recording. Not only is the live public meeting available to anyone in the public following the same public comment procedures as in person, the recording continues to be available for reference to anyone. To ensure continued success, the board has requested a redesign of the MSAD11 boardroom at 150 Highland Avenue in Gardner. The redesign will allow the board to all fit in one space along with one continuous table while also creating more space for public seating. Additionally, the room is currently being equipped with technology to enable us to continue to live stream meetings into the future, in addition to opening the space for in-person engagement following proper board procedures. It is the intention of the board and the MSAD11 school community to continue to be as inclusive and transparent as possible in our work.
Thank you,
Matt?
Becky.
Matt, let's now move on to the agenda.
I'll
Number
move on to agenda item number 2, comments from the community. We welcome comments from the public and offered schoolboard@msad11.org email address as the forum for the comments. Angela, would you please read the communications that have been sent from the community? To ensure full access, Angela has compiled all of the communications in order of receipt and will display the messages on the screen without email addresses to ensure privacy while reading them aloud. Angela?
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Just to make sure you can see it. Yes, let me see if I can make it a little bigger. Okay, it's a little bigger. Okay, June 18th, 2020, 11:51 a.m. Dear board members and administrators, I cannot thank you enough for all you do to represent our students, staff, and families in meeting our community's educational needs. I know that being a school board member has changed considerably over the years to include so much more work and dedication on each member's part. I try to do my part as a community member and employee by watching most of the recorded meetings, and it is mind-boggling how much work you've put into the course of a normal year, much less during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for this commitment. I am also very grateful for the thoughtful and respectful approach you took to communicating to the larger public regarding the concerns about critical race theory as a supposed part of our curriculum on June 17, 2021. I happened to stumble across a Facebook post related to this issue, which was quite concerning. I immediately watched the recorded meeting for clarification. My letter has less to do with the content of the AP class, the book list, or the debate that exists around CRT. It is mostly in response to the meeting as a West Gardner resident, MSAD11 educator, and a parent of 2 children who will attend GAHS in the next few years, focusing on the appreciation I have for the clarity and leadership I witnessed during the meeting. As a parent, I was relieved that opportunities to disagree, defend opinions, and possibly the chance or willingness to consider adapting strongly held beliefs with discourse and examination will continue to be offered and encouraged. I believe among the many things our youth is growing into and toward, social and cultural issues of our day should be explored, not avoided. As Mr. Lothridge pointed out, it is absolutely necessary that our children mature into adults who are able to examine conflicting beliefs and learn how to think about and discuss these beliefs. Thank you, Mrs. Hardy, for working with the course's instructor, the English department team, and refining the syllabus together to keep the learning integrity of this opportunity in place. Too many of us do not know how to have respectful, constructive conversations about hard topics. Our children need all the guidance they can get to develop these skills, and especially at the high school level, to advocate for their own learning. Speaking as a taxpayer, I am thrilled to be reminded that our high school students have the option of taking college-level courses with staff who are committed to the immense amount of work, planning, and support that comes with teaching AP courses. Our students are extremely lucky to have this option, and we are extremely lucky to have educators who can manage this amount of professional responsibility and workload. From my perspective as an educator in the district, I was moved by the support and pride that Angela Hardy and Becky Fless communicated for their teachers and staff during the portion of the meeting that dealt with these parent concerns. I was so grateful that Mrs. Fless reiterated how critically important it is for families to reach out to teachers directly whenever a concern arises. She is absolutely correct that teachers and families create amazing bonds and partnerships with honest, open communication, and there is no substitute for that communication. Reminding parents and caregivers that respectful communication with a child's teacher is the first step to addressing concerns was something I particularly appreciated. Communication is where our strength begins as a team. Finally, at the end of an extremely stressful year for so many people, I found myself buoyed by the clear appreciation and respect that the administrators and majority of board members who chose to speak conveyed for their teachers. I think it was helpful that it was mentioned more than once that the AP instructor's intention was genuine, and by association, all of our schools and district staff are professionals who have students' best interests at heart. There is no way to express how absolutely impactful that was to hear, being shared in such a public forum. While most of us know the mutual respect is there, hearing it in such a public way is encouraging and uplifting. Thank you for your service to our community and your transparent and thoughtful approach to handling this matter. Respectfully, Sarah Hanley. June 20th, 2021, 12:05 p.m. Hello. I just wanted to raise my concerns and thoughts on the removal of the 33 nonfiction books included in the AP Language summer homework assignment. I understand that administration was put into a very tight box when making a decision revolving the books, and that the choice has already been made not to require them, However, if you all have a moment to read this, I would love to voice my personal opinion, putting in words from other students throughout. First off, I wanted to address the motive of this decision. Most of the information coming through on this issue is from different news sources in Maine. I have learned throughout the years how much some of the stories get twisted for public appeal, and I wanted to get the information from a firsthand source. The specific article I read and the one that is being shared around is from the Kennebec Journal. A section that my eye was drawn to mentioned the people who came forward with initial complaints. One of the groups of people, quote, and others were taxpayers with no children in attendance, unquote, stuck out quite a bit. My biggest concern throughout this whole uproar is that the administration will succumb to the pressure of losing money, the result being a loss of these valuable books. I have a feeling that when being discussed further in the future, the school district will choose to just get rid of the books because it's easier than going through the hassle of arguing with groups of people and potentially losing money. However, I hope to convince you to veer from this motive and take heavily into account other factors. There's only one main argument being mentioned by the groups of people who complained to administration. Quote, the letters of complaint alleged the books on the list would teach the students critical race theory, which is an academic concept that has been around for decades, unquote. When looking at this, the first thing I can say is that not all 33 of those books talked about critical race theory. For example, A Beautiful Struggle by Ta-Nehisi Coates has a summary that reads, quote, a father, two sons, and an unlikely road to manhood. It is what the beautiful struggle is about. Ta-Nehisi tells the story of his life, about his parents, siblings, teachers, friends, and other people who surrounded him, and has at least minimal influence on his road to manhood. By going off of the definition, unquote. By going off of the definition provided by the Kennebec Journal, this book clearly is not based on public policies or legal systems, or at least isn't the main idea of the book, and therefore already invalidates their argument. It is simply about the lifestyle of a young Black boy and his struggles, which is obviously going to include racism. Just like other books, which follows white characters / people, struggles are going to be present. I have read books in classrooms with mentions of SA, gender inequality, and fictitious struggles of racism, all of which people struggle with in real life as well. Just because these books are nonfiction does not make them any less valid or different for that matter. If there are options that do not revolve around this said critical race theory, then that should have been enough of an argument to keep them, as students have a choice. I would now like to mention why using critical race theory as an argument to remove these books should not be considered. There is no doubt that we live in a very rural area with few people of color attending our school district. It is alarming that people are using the idea of critical race theory to combat the instruction of these books, especially since most of the people attending the district and the taxpayers among us are in fact white. I also find it shocking that this would be an argument or even be considered a theory, with many of the books on the list being biographies or having to do with an actual person's life. I guarantee that half of the people that complained did not read any of these books, nor did they read the summaries surrounding them. If an actual person of color is talking about their experience in the legal system and how that impacted them, I do not understand how that is a theory. I would also like to bring about the fact that a lot of what we teach is theory. For example, some of the people in sophomore honors English could consider the religion through art unit a theory. However, all of us respectfully, for the most part, learned some of the stories and even presented them. Half of the stuff we teach in history could possibly have occurred differently, a theory in itself. I wish that a list of the summaries was released to the public before making this decision, because that would once again combat the idea that students did not have an option and were forced to learn about a theory. I would finally like to talk about my experience as a student at this school and why critical race theory is not a theory at all, and why students who are offended by these topics should respectfully not be taking this course. I had the privilege of taking AP seminar this past year, and it was one of the best learning experiences I have ever had. I would like to mention that for part 1 of the scored tasks by College Board, every group did something to do with critical race theory. The results were not shocking, to say the least. I have attached my IRR about the incarceration of Black Americans based on collegiate studies and data, which automatically refutes the idea that critical race theory is a theory at all. This was all student chosen. However, I would like to talk about part 2 put out by the College Board. For those unaware, part 2 of AP Seminar was a presentation and an essay revolving around stimulus materials put out by the College Board. Our topics all had to directly and solidly tie into the stimulus materials, which was then scored by the College Board and Mrs. DeSoto. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because every single stimulus source but one that College Board released had to do with gender discrimination and racial prejudice in sports, a lot of which mentioned policies and social construct. To further this, the end of course exam had us writing an essay with stimulus materials that had to do with gender discrimination with the Nobel Prize and even contained a verse from the Bible. The fact of the matter is that if critical race theory is a thing, then the College Board definitely believes in it and goes out of their way to purposely give out materials to force students to think about these problems in the world. If these students/parents have that much of an issue with this homework and the idea, then I'm not sure why they are taking this course. I'm the last person to support the College Board, but it is obvious that they want these ideas taught in the classroom, so it should not be discarded from the AP language curriculum. These ideas are unavoidable, even if the KVCC online English course I took, even in it. So I am not sure why we need to be careful about our instruction. This whole thing comes down to students being comfortable to attend our school district. I know of several people of color leaving the school district due to different decisions and policies set by the school board and administration. One of my closest friends is leaving due to the racism that they have faced and the lack of support given by the school. I am part of the dress code committee and a lot of the staff don't even see the racism and prejudice that takes place in the walls of Gardner Area High School, even related to certain clothing. There are people walking with Confederate merchandise and students that think it is okay to say racial slurs outside of school, mostly because our curriculum does not target these issues, but rather steps over them. If we can read books that have racist characters who say slurs in them, then why should we be forced to read the books that will educate our generation and turn us into better people? The truth of the matter is that if this decision sticks and a message is not sent out about why these books are valuable, then people will get the idea that the school does not care about minorities attending our district, which will create more racism and toxic environments. I hope that you take all of these reasons heavily into consideration when making your decision for the following years. I am not trying to be disrespectful or defiant in any way, and my love for this district can be seen through my activeness in the high school community. However, I feel like I need to stick up for what is right at the moment, and I am hoping that the wrong morals do not veer the district away from making the right decision. Thank you for taking my voice into consideration, Sean Jimenez. July 3rd, 2021, 5:08 p.m. There is a note here because it was unclear who it was addressed to. As a taxpayer in the city of Gardner that pays your salary, I am appalled that you are trying to sneak CRT into our schools. This is racism at its best. This teaching, or should I say indoctrination to our children, will not stand. It is flat out wrong. It is teaching our children to see people in color, not the content of their character. Although I have no children attending MSAD11, I will be joining many others to fight against this. And if you continue to push CRT, I will do my best to make sure you are looking for another job elsewhere, somewhere else. Charles J. McLaughlin III. Reply requested. July 6, 2021. Date, time. Why do I not have it? I'm sorry, I don't have a timestamp. I had it. Dear MSAD11 Curriculum Committee, I would like to express my thanks for the response to my concern regarding critical race theory in MSAD11. I was pleased with the speed at which the board and administration responded in action that was taken specifically regarding the GAHS AP language course. I watched and listened to the special board meeting held on 6/17/2021, and would like to take a few moments to share some additional thoughts I have regarding this topic. Transparency. Is it the curriculum committee's opinion that any MSAD11 curriculum information should be withheld or hidden from the public? Ever? When Jim Lothridge asked for the original book list be shared with him, Angela Hardy made a comment that widely opened my eyes. I'm paraphrasing here, but in my perception, she snarkily, sarcastically said, quote, apparently the public has access to this list, unquote. I would like to know if I misinterpreted this comment, but it made me cringe thinking that there may be curriculum details that are withheld from the public. If this is the case, I would encourage the curriculum committee to discuss if this is how the district chooses to proceed. Furthermore, Ms. Cheeseman's website is currently inaccessible to the public. She is the AP language teacher for the current session. This could be coincidence, but I find it worth investigating based on the current situation. AP language as an elective. By stating AP language is an elective is technically a correct statement. However, for almost every college-bound student, it is more of an expectation as opposed to an elective. In other words, most college-bound students will elect to take this course for college resumes/applications. They are pressured by guidance counselors, advisors, and teachers to take these courses for college prep. Regardless, in the context of CRT discussions, it is irrelevant that the course is an elective. The complaint regarding CRT is deeper than just this course or this book list. It was also stated that this course helps with critical thinking and analysis and how we grow as we challenge our beliefs. I wholeheartedly agree with this approach. However, I wholeheartedly disagree that all AP Lang students should be given a list of 33 books that are predominantly written by CRT proponents. This is a perfect example of educators pushing CRT in the classroom. One of the disconnects I noticed is Becky and Angela stating that MSAD11 does not teach CRT in the classroom, but the teachers are doing exactly what you claim they are not. Publishing this list is a CRT activity, including the course outline details. Educator bias. It was mentioned several times during the meeting that we should have faith in our teachers and we should trust them to choose the curriculum because they are the ones who have read these books. It was also stated that these books have been vetted. I ask who were they vetted by? What process was used in this vetting? Was it simply the publisher who put a paragraph on their website stating that these 33 books were appropriate for advanced high school classes? Or was it a small group of educators who are pushing CRT in our schools? I would encourage you to learn more about the vetting process. I spent 5.5 years as a teacher in public high schools from 2011 to 2016 and had 2 children graduate from GAHS, one in 2018 and one in 2021. I have seen and heard with my own eyes and ears how bias manifests itself in a public school. I think the main point I want to make regarding this topic is teacher bias is getting worse. The bias of many educators is growing in our district day by day, year by year. It's subtle, not blatant or obvious, and quite honestly, not even noticed sometimes by the teachers themselves. Many students are simply telling the teachers what they want to hear in fear of confrontation, public humiliation, or grade reduction. They simply go through the motions, do what they are supposed to do, and move on. These students are not given the opportunity to practice critical thinking or provide a well-crafted argument that opposes the teacher's opinion. Several times during this meeting, it was also stated that the staff, quote, values your children, unquote. I'm here to suggest that the, quote, some staff values some of our children, unquote. This isn't to say that we have a major caring problem in our district, but I don't think it's 100% accurate for administration to make a blanket statement without having further information. I know COVID has kept the classroom inaccessible for most, but I would encourage the curriculum committee to interview some recent graduates and request some examples of teachers acting in a biased manner. You may just get a little more honesty as the fear of retribution should be lessened. When interviewing teachers, they are going to tell you what you want to hear. Quote, I keep my politics to myself, unquote, or quote, I let students have any opinion they choose, unquote. I encourage you to ask the kids. The messages being delivered implicitly and explicitly are to the point where they cannot be ignored any longer. 3, school board chain of command. I understand the concept of following the chain of command when a concern arises and the importance of building relationships within our community. I think you'll find several community members reached out to several teachers within the last few months regarding several issues, not just CRT, and became frustrated. I don't have tons of experience with the school board's role in setting curriculum, but since it is a public school district and the school board members represent the public, I'm going to continue to address my concerns to the school board. I believe this group should be leading and setting the curriculum with input from all parties as outlined in the school board policy IGA. I believe if IGA was better adhered to, many of these conversations would happen naturally. I also believe this is extremely important and deserves the attention of this committee, the entire board, and district administration. I would expect the school board to take an active leadership role in addressing not just CRT, but some of the other controversial topics. Pause. Where it says I'm going to continue, I think I accidentally hit return. I don't believe that was the author's intent. Final thoughts. If you are still reading, thank you. I struggle with these letters because they are often perceived as negative or just complaining. I believe that this and other curriculum topics are more important now than ever. I would like to volunteer to join the curriculum committee as a community member if that is deemed helpful to further these discussions. Please reach out to me and let me know how I can be of assistance. Sincerely, Jeremy Porter. July 7th, 2021, 12:33 p.m. Dear Superintendent Hopkins and Kennebec County educators, my husband and I recently received a letter in our mailbox from the Kennebec Populist Republicans Caucus, KPRC, which I'm sure you have seen, but will try to scan and attach, detailing their reasons for opposing the teaching of critical race theory in public schools. I sincerely hope that their release of your contact information has the opposite of their intended effect with everyone as it has with us. With 2 young children who will soon be starting school, we are fully in support of CRT education being added to the curriculum. I am sure that you will be receiving many lengthy emails on the topic, and I apologize for adding to them, but I'd like to detail our reasons and rebut some of the statements in the letter. Because the letter particularly attached this, oh, sorry, folks. How do I make this? Sorry if I'm making your bellies hurt. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Because they referenced the flyer or attachment, I was asked to make sure the attachment was visible. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll give you a moment to scan it. For background, both my husband and I and our children are European Americans, as the KPRC would term us. We have no personal experience with racial or even much social discrimination, but we don't believe that it is that is necessary for supporting education about those who do. After receiving the letter, I did some more research on CRT in order to more fully understand the theory and the critiques of it. If my understanding is correct, CRT is designed to be an identification and criticism of racial and social inequalities rather than to be focused merely on cultural relevance for students. Instead of laying the blame of racism on individual prejudices and calling white people inherently racist, it explores racism as a social construct that has been institutionalized in many countries, ours included. This institutionalized racism can be seen by anyone looking for gerrymandering, for-profit prison systems, voting laws, affordable housing zones, and other policies that keep high minority population areas at economic, educational, and social disadvantages. Caucasians are inherently privileged in our current society, and there's no point in pretending otherwise. To do so would not only be historically inaccurate, but would also prevent any socioeconomic growth and progress towards equality. There are some themes of CRT that I am particularly a fan of. One is its promotion of political organizing as opposed to rights-based solutions, which may leave too much power with those who are privileged and not empower minorities enough. I am concerned by the overwhelming number of aging white male politicians, and I'm glad that CRT would seem to promote changing that. Another positive is the intersectional focus that CRT espouses, which can promote a broader understanding of social, ethical, and racial problems by exploring multiple, different, and often overlapping viewpoints. Life is not black and white, but filled with shades of gray, as the saying goes. Not all members of a minority have the same needs or experience the same discrimination/injustice, so an intersectional focus can help a wider range of people. I'm also in favor of the storytelling and standpoint epistemology themes of CRT, which I think go hand in hand. Students are taught to choose their sources carefully in their research for projects, and that primary sources, e.g. firsthand accounts, are the gold standard. This would highly support the teachings of CRT that focus on minorities being best able to speak about injustices because they have personally experienced them, making them a primary source. To summarize, my husband and I are hopeful that CRT will be introduced into the public school system's curriculum. We believe that it is necessary knowledge for every member of our society and that no social, racial, or economic equality can be reached without it. Thank you for all your hard work in informing the next generations of leaders, as well as for all you put up with from the parents. We hope our support of teaching CRT will encourage you to continue fighting for a curriculum that is socially, racially, and ethically just. Regards, Megan and Thomas Kalinowski, Gardner, Maine. Megan Kalinowski, Bachelor of Science, University of New England. July 7, 2021, 9:06 p.m. Oh, welcome, Pat. Trick. Dear MSAD11 school board members, Chairperson Flass, Mr. Kempton, Superintendent Hopkins, and Director of Curriculum and Instruction Hardy. The issue regarding the decision that students are no longer required to read a book from the list of 33 titles for the AP English Language and Composition class was recently brought to our attention. The Civil Rights team has decided to weigh in on this issue because we believe that the concerns regarding the AP English Language and Composition class were biased. Our mission is to increase the safety of students by reducing biased, motivated behaviors and harassment. Some community members who reacted with complaints do not have students in the class, and the decision was made based on those concerns without asking the opinion of students who signed up for the class. Students were not informed about the change, and the whole process was not brought to the attention of most people until after the decision to remove the book was made. The removal of the reading list was unfair to the students in the class. The AP English Language and Composition course focuses on the ability to make an argument based on a given topic or piece of literature. Students are expected to be able to form their own opinions and back them up with evidence based on what they have read, no matter what opinion the literature is presenting. One of the concerns raised was that the 33 books listed for the summer work were pushing an opinion onto the students that they were supposed to agree with. This, however, is not the case. As previously mentioned, the class objective is to be able to make your own argument and form an individual opinion. The class is supposed to mirror a college class. A few of the books were even pulled from a list of required reading for University of Maine at Orono students. In order to prepare students for the college level material and AP test, it is important to follow the curriculum. Topics talked about in class are very likely going to be on the AP test. Therefore, it is important to read the recommended books. The AP English Language and Composition class revolves around social justice. The books used for the summer assignment need to relate to that topic, not a random nonfiction book. The social justice aspect of the class allows for debate, since it is difficult to argue facts otherwise. Books on the list were chosen because they include different perspectives, which allow students to see both sides form their own opinions, and be successful on the assignment. The Civil Rights team would also like to point out that most of the books on the list are either written by or about people of color. People of color are constantly silenced, and they rarely, if at all, learn about their own race at school. As you know, Gardner Area High School is not especially diverse in regards to race, and the books on the list for the summer work bring attention to these voices that are often overlooked. The decision to have these books not be required was passed without representation from individuals of color. This has caused some students of color in our school to be unsettled and deeply disturbed. It was eye-opening to hear the amount of discrimination in our community as complaints were shared at the previous school board meeting. Many brought up unfounded concerns about critical race theory, which is insulting to students as we feel we can be trusted to form our own thoughts on these issues. With this being said, our team feels that by not including voices of color in our curriculum, specifically writers featured among the reading list, it directly goes against our mission as a civil rights team and promotes bias in our school system. In conclusion, the civil rights team believes that the requirement to read a book from the AP English Language and Composition list should be put back into place. We hope you can understand our concerns. Along with this letter, the civil rights team will be taking further action on this matter. Sincerely, the GAHS Civil Rights Team Advisory Panel, Jada Williams, Gigi Grant, and Alyssa Henderson. One second. July 10th, 2021, 3:49 p.m. Hello, I am writing today not as a parent of kids in school, but as a Gardner resident. I was very disappointed to hear about the uproar over the AP summer reading list. The fact that many who got involved had no children in school made me realize that I too should weigh in. I wish the list for a college-level course would have been required. I am glad the students were still able to select from the list provided, but wouldn't the discussions have been so much better if they were all discussing the same topic? I'm writing this on the anniversary of the Scopes trial, where a popular science teacher was arrested for teaching evolution, a trial in which the judge refused to allow expert testimony from scientists. One can say that was in the past, and surely we are beyond that now. We aren't. Certainly Tennessee isn't. They recently fired a teacher for teaching anti-racism and, quote, not providing access to a variety of points of view, unquote. While the opposing view to anti-racist is racist, I don't believe a teacher should have to supply racist materials, do you? It was also stated he supplied inappropriate materials, referring to an article by Ta-Nehisi Coates, an award-winning journalist/author, and a spoken word poem by Kyla Janae Lacey. Students have defended his teaching, saying he always provided open discussion about current events. Are racism, anti-racism, and white privilege difficult topics? Absolutely, which is why they should be discussed, since what we are doing is preparing these kids for the world. At the Scopes trial, the opposing counsel was called to testify, and as part of his testimony stated, quote, I do not think about things I do not think about, unquote. We can't afford as a society to not think about things. We need children learning how to think and seek out answers to the world's problems, to our country's problems, and to our community's problems. It is critical that almost 100 years after Scopes, we learn the lessons of the past. By not allowing the examination of the evidence, a teacher was convicted. We cannot let moral panic dictate what children are taught, especially in high school. Topics that are controversial today may in the future be recognized as fact. We need students who can discern fact from fiction and understand that not every fact is in our textbooks. Students need to know about the diversity of people, the plurality of ideas and identities, if we expect them to go out into the world. By discussing hard topics, students will also learn how to respectfully disagree. The classroom should be a safe space to test their ideas. When we avoid talking about current events and prevent students from delving into the controversy, we rob them of the opportunity to see the connection between themselves and the world they live in. Thank you for your work, Claire Maron, Monkey Tree owner, Gardner, Maine. July 11th, 2021, 7:46 a.m. Witnessing the crowd of sign bearers in Gardner, I immediately sensed a right-wing atmosphere. No people of color, no creative verbiage, only slogans. The handout is a thinly veiled piece of propaganda, twisting the entire issue 180 degrees right from the beginning. We must educate, not protect our children. We must openly discuss, not stop CRT. Children can live with and be protected through the truth. It's the adults who become dangerously unstable through distortions. CRT reveals, not emphasizes, racial disharmony and inequality. CRT uses public education funding to educate, teaching documented historical race-based topics alongside traditional subjects. United in their efforts to keep this public hearing open to all and acknowledging science-based concern over COVID, moved it to Zoom. CRT promotes facts, re American history, that are inconvenient to traditional conservative narratives. With book content in books like White Fragility, any reasonable person would eventually agree. True diversity, all persons should be treated equal, but through denial of historical truths, we unconsciously perpetuate racism. A harsh critique of history is what CRT is. State your thoughts clearly to the school superintendent and supporting board members. Okay. Children can accept truth. It's the crystallized, fearful adults that are in denial about the real history and real current changes in our society and our world. Avoiding and denying truth only weakens us all. The right-wing conservative and apparently Southern Confederate Jim Crow reactionary crowd is showing their classic moral cowardice. It takes courage and extra effort to face the truth and use it to shape a realistic, inevitable future. Sad that so many are terrified of real change, and it's understandable they are in an irrational and counterproductive panic. Out of this fear comes resentment and grievance against other viewpoints. Grievance is addictive. Nurturing it invokes neural pathways that are identical to drug addiction. When addicts are looking for a fix, watch out. Colin Casey, Whitefield. July 11th, 2021, 2:51 p.m. Dear Superintendent Hopkins, I wish to briefly encourage you to stick to your decision to encourage high school students to learn how to be able to think thoughtfully about the important issue of race history in our country. As a 76-year-old who was in high school when this was still a closed-off subject, which I was discouraged from even bringing up, I wish I had then the great opportunity to grow intellectually and emotionally, which you will provide. Please do not give an inch to the bullying, which language like, quote, spread of hate, unquote, is part of. You will do us all a service by insisting on an open educational environment for your students. Sincerely, Diane Moongrove, PhD, Augusta, Maine. July 11, 2021, 4:32 p.m. Dear Ms. Hopkins, Ms. Hardy, and the school board members, please know that I actively support the original suggested summer AP reading list. The books listed offer students the opportunity to be exposed to points of view regarding the history of the United States other than the more whitewashed ones that are often presented. It is intended, in its intended form, critical race theory is a scholarly theoretical framework that attempts to look at how our laws have intentionally or unintentionally supported racial disparities. It is an attempt to understand problems and ultimately find ways to mitigate the consequences of these actions. Unfortunately, the true intent of this theory has been co-opted by certain groups, and the definition has been changed to make it seem as if it is an attack on European Americans and the very, quote, the very foundation, unquote, of America itself. I would suggest that it is vital that students be exposed to both sides of this argument and through reading, discussion, research, be able to make their own decisions. I encourage you to support curriculum and teachers that allow students the opportunity to participate in such academic activities. Thank you for all that you do on behalf of the students of the district. Susan Shaw, LMSW. July 11th, 2021, 8:31 p.m. Madam Chair, my name is Sandra Martin, and I'm a Gardner resident. I am writing on behalf of my school-age children and my fellow Republicans. I know you're aware of the diversity rally the Kennebec Populist Republicans held this past Saturday to bring awareness to the community about this issue. I'm also aware that you seem to believe the governor's emergency order is still in place and are consequentially holding this important meeting without the public input many of us would have liked to have participated in. The governor's order ended June 30th, but as we are only allowed to give voice to this issue via email, here goes. We are being told that CRT is not going to be taught. Is this true? We are also being told that what our students can expect is a focused look at an incredibly sensitive, potentially divisive topic, namely the truth about the racist history of America. Now, if that were the case, I would first be concerned that currently the racial divide in America is a fire that is constantly stoked in the media and everywhere else you happen to be. Flags and signs and rhetoric are the norm, it seems. Adults can scarcely have a civil conversation without emotions running high. This is now something the school board feels is important to make a focal point here in rural Maine. I would ask why. What do our students stand to gain versus what type of distraction would this cause in their normal course of study? Would this focus truly help them, or is it possible that the adults they are effectively held captive by have an agenda, an adult biased agenda that could actually harm them? Next, I would be concerned that, as stated, the focus would not be political. Were it thoroughly taught, the history of racism in America would absolutely have to include politics. Let me illustrate. We do not teach children about the Holocaust without mentioning the Nazi Party. We do not say simply that some bad Germans killed Jewish people. There is usually an in-depth discussion of the Nazi Party and its leadership. We discuss or should discuss dehumanization. The same should be discussed when racism in America is taught. Many people aren't aware of the origins of the Republican Party, why they banded together, what kept them together, and what they have accomplished for equality in America. One of our own, Owen Lovejoy from Kennebec County, was a close personal friend of Abraham Lincoln and instrumental in the abolitionist movement. Another Republican, Carl Milliken, signed the bill that gave women the right to vote here in Augusta in 1919. Many folks seem to believe that somewhere in the 60s, the parties flipped and that the formerly very racist Democrats all decided that they were the peace and love crew, and that the Republicans all decided that they were now anti-Black. What actually happened was that the Republicans fought for civil rights in the 60s. Kennedy hemmed and hawed, was shot, and Johnson ended up signing civil rights into action, but was quoted as saying, quote, "We'll give these and the right to vote, and they'll be voting Democratic for 200 years, unquote." Sorry, as a reader, I won't say that word. There is some debate on Snopes, of course, as to the validity of this statement, but they will go as far as acknowledge this little dandy. Quote, they're getting pretty uppity these days, and that's a problem for us since they've got something now they never had before, the political pull to back up their uppityness. Now we've got to do something about this. We've got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down, not enough to make a difference. For if we don't move at all, then their allies will line up against us and there'll be no way of stopping them. And we'll lose the filibuster and there'll be no way of putting a brake on all sorts of wild legislation. It'll be Reconstruction all over again, unquote. To be clear, it's highlighted because that's how it came in as the email. Now I ask, is it possible your focus on the history of racism in America will include any of this? And more importantly, is it even possible not to discuss politics when they are so clearly one of the defining points of said history? Somehow, all of this is going to wrapped up as some white people were racist. How can any dignified educator even begin to think that would be an acceptable focus? Republicans continue to battle against the dehumanization of their fellow man by protecting the rights of the preborn, 1 in 3 of whom, if they are Black, are aborted. Will this be mentioned? I will end by saying that if the educating body at MSAD11 is bound and determined to teach racial sensitivity, they probably will, because the truth is children in school are much like children anywhere else, beholden to whatever adult is in front of them at the moment. You will be held accountable, however, to teach them the whole truth and nothing but the truth by God and their parents. Respectfully, Sandra Martin, GOP Platform Committee Member, Kennebec Populist Republican Vice Chair. July 11th, 2021, 9:08 p.m. I am writing in support of the original AP English Language and Composition Summer Reading List. I am a member of the Gardner community, but do not have children in the high school. I was impressed with the reading list, having read a number of them myself. I not only learned a great deal, but learned how much I have yet to learn. Isn't that one of the primary tenets of a quality education? We read to spark our curiosity and inspire continued learning. All of us and all of our children need to be exposed to the factual history of race in our country, as well as to the emotional toll it has taken on people of color. I am proud of those who put this list together and hope they will not reduce our children's exposure to literature based on fear-mongering and a false understanding of what is presented in these books. It seems that this list has caused some in the community as well as some outside of our community consternation. The list is being labeled as books espousing, quote, critical race theory, unquote, what I believe is an erroneous definition of what CRT means. CRT is certainly not espousing that, quote, American citizens should be judged by the color of their skin rather than by the content of their character, unquote. This is a quote from a missive being distributed in Gardner on 7/10/21. Thank you to the superintendent, the teachers, and all of the board members who expend time and effort in educating our next generation. J. Louise Soul. July 12, 2021, 11 a.m. Dear school board members, I'm not sure how sending comments in regards to school board meetings typically works, but I would like to voice my thoughts about the AP English Summer Reading List. I was disappointed that the AP Language and Composition Reading List was altered from its original content. The topics of race, racism, and white supremacy are important to discuss, and the reading material would have helped facilitate these discussions in both students and the community. The reading list would have also provided perspectives from people of color who have different lived experiences in America simply due to the color of their skin. As a former graduate of Gardner, I don't believe that the reading list was promoting any kind of hidden agenda and fully support its original form. Thank you, Sarah Faust. July 12th, 2021, 3:52 p.m. I'm writing to express my support that the GAHS summer reading list about different racial perspectives. School is the perfect place to read about and discuss these kinds of issues. I hope that you will continue to support diversity in the curriculum. Thank you, Karen Faust. July 12, 2021, 2:35 p.m. Dear school board members, I am writing to the school board as a parent and as a community member concerned about stifling teachers' abilities to ask their students to dig deeply into our history and to be willing to ask hard questions about who we have been as a nation, who we are now, and who we want to be. My son, Patrick, will be taking AP English this fall, and I have 2 other children attending Gardner schools. I am also a minister in the community, and in that capacity, I try to promote the value of open and honest dialogue, even around difficult topics like reckoning with our nation's history around race. Members of our church began an intentional dialogue about race in our society after the shooting of George Floyd in May of 2020. We used a curriculum called Sacred Ground, which includes readings and videos that encourage dialogue about our nation's history of race relations and is an quote, attempt to be responsive to the profound challenges that currently exist in our society. It is focused on the challenges that swirl around issues of race and racism, as well as the difficult but respectful and transformative dialogue we need to have with each other about them. It invites participants to walk back through history in order to peel away the layers that brought us to today, and to do so in a personal way, reflecting on family histories and stories, as well as important narratives that shape the collective American story, unquote. And there's a link presented. Participating in Sacred Ground led me to ask questions of my own history. My family recently returned from spending 2 weeks in Kentucky, my birthplace. While we were there, my dad took us to the Rhodes Cemetery in Browder, Kentucky. This is a cemetery of my dad's ancestors and is on the land that had belonged to Captain Henry Rhodes and several generations after him. Captain Henry Rhodes was considered the godfather of Muhlenberg County. He fought in the Revolutionary War under General Muhlenberg and led a group of settlers, mainly of German descent, west to settle in Kentucky, where there were grants of land being given for military service. Captain Rhodes served in the Kentucky legislature, and when a new county was formed where he had land, he named it after his former general. I spent some time researching Henry Rhodes after our visit to the cemetery. And as I was reading about the settlement of this part of Kentucky by Henry Rhodes and others, I noticed that as they were moving in, they built fortifications along the river to provide refuge in the case of what one document called Indian attacks. Reading that made me realize that, of course, the land was being given to these settlers for military service was not land that was uninhabited. Native Americans have made it their home for thousands of years. So I had to ask, quote, what happened to those people already living on the land when this wave of settlers found their way there and claimed it, unquote. There was also the question of slave ownership that came up in my research. Apparently, some of these early settlers brought slaves with them. Would my ancestor, Captain Rhodes, have owned a slave? Why are these questions important, you might ask? After all, I can't change the past. If my ancestors were part of a movement that drove Native Americans off their land, or if they owned slaves, I can't go back and change that. But I believe that we can't move forward to something better without fully understanding our past, both as a nation and in our own personal histories. All of us have both positive and negative influences from our families of origin that have shaped who we are. And while it's right and good to celebrate the positive influences on who we are, we can't grow without being honest about the negative things too. Many of us have family histories that include abuse, addiction, harmful family dynamics, abandonment, violence, and more. We can't ignore our family stories. We have to be honest about them in order to heal those broken parts of ourselves so that we can pass on a healthier future to our children. I believe that's true for our country as well. I am always in support of truth-telling, even when it's hard, even when it's painful and shameful. And I am convinced that we and our children can handle that truth-telling, and that, in fact, it'll make us stronger and more resilient, kinder, and more justice-oriented. Like the sacred groundwork that we did at Christ Church, I believe that our young people need to do this work too. Leonard Pitts Jr. calls this work of walking back through history to peel away the layers that brought us to today, walking sacred ground. He says, understand that this is sacred ground and it hurts to walk here, but at the same time, I need to walk here, need the strength, the sense of purpose, the knowledge of self that walking here imparts. Katrina Brown, who is the primary creator of the Sacred Ground curriculum, says it's like this, quote, "If we enter the sacred ground of the labyrinth to walk back in time, see the markers along the highway showing where we went astray, ask genuine questions of our history, be humble students of our past, acknowledge the harms done and the harms endured, if we can do these things, then God willing, we can eventually come to some centered spot, take stock, see, sense, feel, mourn, pray, and then turn and walk back out together," unquote. Studying and discussing our nation's history of racial injustice is not about shaming our students. It's about healing and progress. It's hard work, but our kids can be trusted to have hard conversations with each other, to debate and even to disagree with each other while remaining respectful. I hope they will have the opportunity to do just that in our public schools. Sincerely, Carrie Rhodes Mansier. July 12th, 2021, 4 p.m. AP Lang curriculum change. As a student who took the AP language and composition class, I can tell you that it made me think in ways that I didn't before. It stretched my thoughts. I will be forever grateful for the curriculum this class was taught by last year. This includes the amazing reading list that was part of the former curriculum. I was in no way forced to feel a certain way about topics discussed, but instead the class analyzed the argument of all sides of the subject. The topics discussed were at a college level because it is a college level course, which is optional to take. For students who didn't want to learn about CRT, there were other options, but that still encompassed the class and the subjects in it. Peregrine Bolduc Ignatiak, student representative on the MSAD11 school board. July 12, 2021, 4:45 p.m. Please do not introduce critical race theory in our schools. Please support true diversity. I feel all people should be treated with respect and dignity, no matter what their race, religion, or sexual identity. God created all persons, and each one is as important as another in his sight. Thank you, Leona M. Fowler Gardner. This email is being included because it was originally sent and there was a glitch in the system and it was caught. Dear members of the board, I'm writing in support of our MSAD11 staff's dedication to helping our students become critical thinkers and compassionate people as they grow and learn in our community. I am the parent of 2 GAHS students who were fortunate to take the AP Language and Composition course. I believe this was an invaluable course to help my children grow into thoughtful and informed human beings. It helped them to analyze information objectively, understand bias, determine relevance, cultivate compassion, and think for themselves. It was an invaluable part of their education. I do not believe the recent uproar by concerned community members represents the wider community of MSAD11. Encouraging students to be thoughtful consumers of information is something this nation desperately needs. There is no indoctrination when we ask people to think for themselves. By inviting students to define, quote, social justice and racial reckoning, unquote, quote, anti-racism and structural racism, unquote, and quote, white privilege and authority, unquote, we are asking them to broaden their understanding, think critically, and create their own schema around very relevant and important ideas. There are those who would like to create a straw man called critical race theory, CRT, to encompass any discussion that involves race or social justice. I would encourage our students to read their arguments with a critical eye as well and determine for themselves how valid their claims may be, and also try to understand why some people are so fearful of addressing sensitive issues. Helping our students to understand what critical race theory is and what it is not would help them become more informed about the information and disinformation that is being thrown out on social media and news outlets. Our schools do not teach CRT, and I object strongly to people characterizing the AP curriculum as such. These arguments further my belief that we need our students to understand the history of racism, Jim Crow, and social injustices so that we can forge a more compassionate community and country going forward. The books selected for the AP Language and Composition course are texts that the rest of this nation's high school students will be reading and discussing. Why on earth would we want our students to be less informed? Why would we limit our students' understanding of sensitive topics so that they can form their own opinions with a wide array of information? Why would we hinder our students' opportunities for developing compassion by seeing the world through another human being's eyes? It was clearly stated that the educator's role is to ensure students will examine the varied perspective, have skills to discuss the topics with others using evidence, learn to listen to opposing views, and develop their own opinions, unquote. Anyone who objects to this needs to ask themselves, quote, why are you so afraid of people learning to think for themselves, unquote. We all need to learn to listen to opposing views, and I am aware I am aware that those who shout, quote, stop teaching CRT in our schools, unquote, have fears that are very real to them. I try to listen to those concerns and fears, but will not allow them to exert undue influence on our curriculum based on falsehoods and fears. Thank you to the MSAD11 staff for courageously addressing sensitive and sometimes controversial issues so that our students can face a divided and diverse world with the skills they will need to develop informed opinions. We need to help them navigate this infodemic of false and misleading information that is meant to muddy the waters of history and current events so they can make their own decisions in life. Thank you to the school board for offering this opportunity to discuss this topic. I implore you to continue to base our curriculum on truths and facts and not more big lies. Our students deserve no less. Paula Burke, parent of 2 recent GAHS graduates, literacy specialist. That is the conclusion of the letter sent in by the public.
Are you sure, Ann?
We
Thank you
quite
for that evolution. So thank you again for reading this letter. I apologize ahead of time if people can hear a chainsaw. My neighbor just decided about 3 minutes ago to start cutting some wood, so I want to plow through this if I can. We understand that this is a sensitive topic, that there are strong emotions. We also have a lot to get through the rest of the meeting. Typically, our curriculum committee meetings are normally no longer than an hour, but we realize that we probably will need to extend that, obviously, this evening, so that's what we're going to do. We want to make sure that all committee and board members have an opportunity to be heard. I just want to remind everybody, to be clear, that public discourse should continue to be respectful, and that all board members are just reminded. I know you all know what how to conduct yourselves in meetings, but I really just want to remind everybody to not interrupt one another when we're speaking, and that we have a policy detailing how complaints are to be handled efficiently at the lowest level possible. If you raise a complaint about an employee, I'll stop you and direct you to follow our established process. So as we move forward, Becky will identify the speakers and I will manage the time. Becky will call folks in order as they raise their hand, and I'll monitor, as I said, the length of time spent. We want to try to keep it to a couple of minutes per committee member and per board member. As I mentioned, we have a couple of other agenda items that we need to get through. So without further ado, Becky, did you want to call on the first board member?
I don't see a raised hand.
I'm assuming that board members want to they may have something to say, they may not. So if you do, just raise your hand, and if not, we'll move on.
And we have the district's response, correct, Angela?
Yes, when you're ready.
Okay. And I think that we should start here. Matt?
You want to do that first?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm writing on behalf of MSAD11 or speaking on behalf as a director of curriculum and instruction. In early June, the district started receiving emails and phone calls out of concern that we are integrating critical race theory or CRT into the curriculum. After further conversation and review, it was apparent that concerns were stemming from a high school advanced placement course assignment. The public communication was shared openly during a live stream board meeting on June 17, 2021. I responded on behalf of our school community and educators during that meeting, and the recorded response is available on the MSAD11.org website under school board, and then scroll down to live feed. The board was able to ask follow-up questions of me, and those responses were also recorded in the video. In the June 17 meeting, the board was satisfied with our next steps. The AP course assignment was adjusted. The opening was rewritten, and documentation from the AP guidelines was included in the summer assignment. The intent was to strengthen student choice in the selection of a text that meets the criteria necessary for the learning goals established by the College Board. With students having expanded choice, the topics are able to be expanded and a conversation can ensue between the student and teacher or librarian to ensure that the books selected meet the AP criteria. The initial book list remains available to students as a reference document, and students may identify texts that were not on the list that meet the criteria for research, analysis of authors' bias, and discussion. Expanding student choice certainly enhances the assignment and maintains the academic integrity critical to any course in our schools. Since the June 17 board meeting, we have continued to receive emails and phone calls. It seems that there may be some confusion in the community about our practices and goals, and we wanted to ensure to resolve any confusion. Sorry. Some members in the community, as indicated by the public comments, are concerned that MSAD11 is teaching CRT. CRT is an academic theory with roots in the 1970s that teaches that racism and disparate racial outcomes are the result of subtle social and institutional dynamics, that our laws and our institutions are structured to promote the white race. The academic theory has remained in legal and higher education arenas until recently. There is a flyer circulating in town alleging that we are teaching CRT and states that we are promoting discrimination, judging people by the color of their skin, encouraging racial disharmony, teaching divisive content, and spreading hate. It is not clear to me that the flyer accurately summarizes the tenets of CRT, but in any event, I want to be perfectly clear here. We are not teaching CRT, and we are not engaged in the activities alleged in the flyer. MSAD11 believes that all students have the right to learn and should be able to do so in spaces designed to be inclusive and equitable. The district's educational philosophy states that we will provide, and quote, educational environment designed to encourage each student to acquire the necessary skills and perspectives needed for a meaningful life and career. All schools will strive to encourage students to form desirable habits that are necessary for them to become responsible, informed citizens. In general, we aim to have students develop attitudes and practices necessary for satisfying, worthwhile lives, unquote. MSAD11 has a commitment to graduate students who will have the knowledge and skills necessary to continue learning, to be an informed thinker, to think critically, to engage in civic and community service, to communicate effectively, and to problem solve. Our district policies set forth by the board have long established that we are teaching students to be respectful members of our community, and that every student should and will feel welcome to learn alongside his or her peers. We believe it is important for our students to understand history from multiple perspectives, to understand current events and their connection to historical events or practices. Our policies promote tolerance, and they categorically prohibit discrimination. They require all of our staff and all of our students to treat one another with dignity, regardless of sex, skin color, sexual orientation, disability, age, and other legally protected characteristics. When a student or staff member violates our policies and bullies, harasses, or treats another with disrespect, such misconduct is dealt with. Our district's policies set by the board also clearly define the curriculum, the process in which curriculum is written and reviewed routinely, and outline ways in which objections to the curriculum can be handled. I addressed this in the June 17 meeting when I discussed the steps that we ask our community to engage in when concerned with course content. We will address this again when we revisit policy IMB later in today's agenda. While the board sets out the expectations for review of curriculum, it is my job to follow through. The district is actively reviewing curriculum. Each content area undergoes a 5-year cycle of review with members from our K-12 learning community to ensure a coherent and equitable curriculum. Year 1 is dedicated to analysis of student achievement in that content area, a thorough review of the educational research related to the content, instructional practice, and achievement of MSAD11 students. Year 2 is dedicated to an internal audit of the application of our curriculum with opportunity for revision to ensure that the learning is appropriately sequenced, developmentally appropriate, attending to the most recent state legislation, and following the most recent iteration of the main learning results. Year 3 is dedicated to a revision of the curriculum based upon the Year 2 recommendations, as well as a focus on the selection of instructional materials using policy IJJ and budgeting for said materials. Years 4 and 5 are dedicated to the initial implementation of a curriculum with routine feedback loops set for faculty and student feedback to remain apprised of strengths evident in the curriculum design and significant challenges that need attention. The curriculum committee at the board level is kept apprised of every step of the process and reviews the outcome of each stage, which goes above and beyond the expectations of policy. These details are outlined in the minutes of the meetings, and because we have been able to live stream meetings, are available in greater detail through the recordings of every meeting over the last 16 months. When the district shifted into COVID responsiveness and virtual communication, the level of access to our work was even greater, and we welcome this. More so than ever before, we were able to include critical stakeholders in decisions related to teaching and learning, instructional designs, management of spaces, and safety protocols through the Return to School Committee that was composed of over 100 community members. Every one of those meetings were live streamed and remain available to the public on the COVID-19 www.MSAD11 dashboard site. The district was able to work closely with childcare providers, families, and area agencies to rally support for every one of our students in ways that we've never been able to achieve previously. For the first time, classes were happening in living rooms across our 4 towns as students logged in using their district laptops to live classes. Teachers were instructing in front of not only their students, but their families and our community. While everyone across this nation and world experienced a few bumps in the road of virtual teaching and learning, we consistently heard positive comments from our families. The conditions were not always ideal, yet we partnered together to help these children learn. We will continue to do so as we shift back into our brick and mortar spaces and learn to draw on what worked during those unprecedented times and revisit the structures and systems that have also worked historically for us and our students. I don't know how much more transparent we can be about our teaching and learning content and practices than we were over the past year for our families. We are so very grateful for the feedback we did receive, positive and constructive, and we grew together and improved tremendously from March 2020 through June 2021. I will continue to strive to support our teachers and principals as they partner with families to work towards academic success with every learner. We will continue to review and revise curriculum in a way that is rigorous, inclusive of our staff and families, consistent, and attending to board policies. Today's board discussion from the public comments, as well as discussion from the policy review, will certainly inform the design of future curriculum committee meetings, as Chair Marshall will be working with me to do that. We are all here because we are committed to our district's educational stance and policies designed to support and enable success for every student in our district. That is the response I have at this time.
Thank you, Angela.
Angela, thank you. Becky, did you want to start calling on board members?
I sure do. And Angela has put out about 10 minutes for this portion. So couple of minutes, and then Matt, you'll wrangle it in. Teresa first.
Hi, I wasn't sure if I was showing up because I raised my hand before Angela started to speak. So just from some of the letters and the comments, from what I gather from the parents that I heard from in different places, their main concern was that the reading list was so different from last year's reading list. That was their main concern. And that at that time, the original list did not have other options. So I think what you did, Angela, was a great thing that gave them more options to read from instead of just that original list. Secondly, I would be willing to interview some of the past students that have graduated from Gardner Area High School. I would like to know what's going on that I don't know about. I think their opinions matter, and I think that we need to hear some input from students that have graduated from there. Also, talking about diversity, I lived in Brooklyn, New York for 8 years. I was a minority. I actually had this epiphany after our first meeting that I lived in an all-colored neighborhood. I was the only white person that lived there with my children. But it never even occurred to me until our first meeting about all of this, which I don't know. I guess that's just the way I live and the way I raise my children. And I wish that everybody else could be that way, but I know it's a work in process. And I would like to recommend that our next meeting is live. Just my thoughts. Thank you.
Tony?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak. Thanks, Matt. Thank you, Angela, for your reading of that. That was a lot of content, and I appreciate your work in not only presenting that, but also in working out this curriculum process. I do want to quick comment on the students, current Gardner High School students that did comment, provide commentary. I thought that was powerful and articulate. And I've frequently been impressed with the students, always impressed with the students in our district. And at times like this, when student voice is heard, I think it is really powerful. And I thought that they were really on point. So I appreciate them stepping forward with that. And I also wanted to extend my appreciation to the teachers that had pulled that original list together. I think had some powerful conversations as the original assignment was changed, and just my acknowledgement that there's behind the scenes work going on. I do want to be mindful of the variety of content that is going on here, or the perspectives that are going on here, and I'm hearing a wide range today, and a lot that I think a lot of people that would be supportive of bringing that list back or finding a way to repopulate that list. I am concerned about not having the list. I think the blank page can be a powerful driver for students. I think we lose the traction, the opportunity to learn how we learn when we don't have that reading list to springboard from. And I think that's part of the policy. I think we're going to go over that. I want to double check, because some of the policy and the process that goes on in identifying curriculum challenges or issues, we have a process for vetting that, and for involving community and for involving all the levels. And I just want to make sure we go over that. I do want to recognize, I'm grateful that we can hear as much community presence as we have, and that, we're still in that 30-day window after the end of the state of emergency. So just for everybody to bear with, I know it's sometimes challenging to do this remotely, and we continue to evolve that. And I do want to, I guess, just a quick thing for me as far as the content of the character. I haven't seen the citation. I believe that is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I don't want to move on without naming that, my understanding of that source. To the extent we can continue this conversation and look at what our process is when we have some of these challenging, sensitive topics or challenged content, what our process is on that. And I would really very much like to return to that, those policies and that process. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tony.
Patrick?
First and foremost, apologize. I was late. I had to get my kids. But that's the reason why I'm here. I'm not assigned to this committee, but seeing all the emails coming through over the past few days, I felt it was important for me as a school board member to be here and throw some insight into this whole thing. Just disclaimer, I'm a person that doesn't see skin color. And one of the things that irritates me is we as a society, I mean, globally, we're going back to the segregation We're going back to, African Americans, Franco Americans, Native Americans. I think we as a society needs to find a way to come together as Americans because we live in America. So I'm just throwing that out there, and I'm not trying to upset anyone or anything like that. That's just my personal beliefs. I do appreciate the fact that we are talking about this. There's a lot of difficult things that are going to be coming, a lot of different things that's going to be coming through over the coming months because you see other school boards nationwide. I mean, there's a lot of anger and resentment, and I do appreciate the parents and the citizens that come to us in a tactful manner and talk to us about their beliefs. And we as school board members, I'm going to speak for myself because I'm not going to speak for anyone else. I appreciate this input because it gives me an opportunity to see other people's viewpoints. And without the public comments, we're driving blindly on this road. And I know for myself, when I make decisions and vote as a school board member, I have no political ideations. I don't have anything that's forcing me to vote the way that I do other than my own personal convictions and what's best for my children because I have children in the school board. And that's why I'm here. I'm teaching them civic duty, and the process that we're going through is very difficult. And Angela, you've been working very hard on this. I know you seemed upset the last meeting with everything. There were some things that were said in some emails that was difficult to swallow. And I appreciate you standing up and going through this process. I do want to emphasize to some of the people's, the sense that I got with some of the emails was that we're trying to sneak stuff in. As a school board member, I'm definitely not trying to sneak anything in. And I believe in transparency. I love these video conferences, and I hope when we do get back into live meetings, which I truly missed. I only had one live meeting before everything went to hell in a handbasket. But and hopefully we'll have community members show up. Hopefully we continue to have the emails and use the technology so that way there's a record for everything. If we forget history, it's bound to repeat itself. And I am for talking about the controversial issues, but it's a thin line between us going through these issues and teaching our children to think for themselves and pushing a ideology that is going to destroy their outview in the future. And there's a line in the sand where the school needs to teach certain things about how to be a person, how to be an individual. I guess if you want to call it the golden rule. I know that religion seems to be a hot topic when it comes to schools, and we're not going to go down that road. But if we taught our children the golden rule at home and the school emphasizes that in the treatments amongst each other, then this world will be a better place. The thin line comes with is where does the school end its overreach in teaching the children how to be a human? That's where the parents and guardians and grandparents and families need to come together. There has to be a community support, but that community pride needs to start at home, needs to be built upon in the school. And, I'll stop with there because it goes into a little bit more gray area, but thank you for letting me speak. Went on too long, so.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
That.
Matthew, your hand is up next.
Thank you, Becky. I just wanted to point out, I happen to feel that fighting discrimination with other forms of discrimination is sort of a backwards way of approaching how we should treat and fight for one another each day. 100 years or so ago, kids in classrooms were taught that the color of their skin was their most important characteristic, and if they looked a certain way, they were inferior. In some districts and in some campuses throughout our country, kids, again, are being taught that color of their skin defines them, and if they look a certain way, they're an oppressor or they're oppressed. Simply, I don't think this is happening in our district. I'm not saying that we haven't had or won't have isolated issues relating to discrimination or race throughout our district, which will be dealt with in accordance with policy or law, but to spend time discussing a topic that doesn't really exist, which is CRT, because we're really not teaching it. We're talking about one AP elective course for the summer and a reading list that some folks didn't particularly agree with, which we addressed and fixed and provided other options for the students. It's a fact that there is a time and place for everything. We should instead, in my opinion, be focused on getting our kids back to school 5 days a week, getting them re-engaged in a social setting after being by themselves for the better part of a year and a half, and dealing with issues such as learning loss, which is huge, vaping, which is going to be a major problem, we all know it, drug and alcohol use, and other major behavioral problems that without a doubt will take up much of our administrator and educators' time this coming school year. So, in saying that, I'm done, Becky, and if anybody else would like to make a comment, please do.
I'll address one thing, and that is the meeting in person. My belief is that we are going to continue for the full 30 days, in part because our space is not ready. The furniture, I believe, is partially installed. Is that accurate, Angela? So the furniture is partially installed, and the video system is in the process of being installed. So and with COVID and the backlog of jobs being done, it's being done as quickly as possible. My belief is that we will be ready to meet in the room in August. That's what I've been led to believe, and I'm crossing my fingers. I truly do miss meeting in person. There are people here I've not met, and that's a funny place to be. So I understand the desire to meet in person. However, as the chair of the board, I'm not willing to give up the transparency that we've experienced over the last 16 months. I am a person who goes home after every single meeting, and I look for 5 days post meeting to see how many people are watching our videos, to see how much traction we're getting. And in the 20 years that I've served on the school board, public does not come to meetings. We don't have people in the audience. And if we stop doing that, there's no guarantee that we'll have that will start, that people will suddenly have more time to go out in the evening and have more time to come sit in the boardroom. This is really a wonderful opportunity that we have had to provide hope and transparency for the families in our community. And I just really firmly believe that we need to continue that. I'm not willing to give that up. And I know other board members have expressed the same thing. So we'll be back in the room as quickly as we possibly can. So,
Becky, might you clarify what it looks like when we're back in the room, when the public is present, what the level of engagement is, so people can be prepared for what that looks and feels like? Can people in the audience speak whenever they want? Is it a discussion between the community members and the board? How does that, is there a way you can provide a very brief detail about how that works?
I think so, and I might need Terry's help. We are going to go to a Zoom format rather than the Google Meets moving forward. Terry, help me. I'm not sure. Can they engage with the board? Will there be like this where you can raise your hand?
I mean to say when real live people are sitting in the audience with real live board members sitting in the room.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So as is in the agenda that we've been doing virtually, there is a space on the agenda for public comments for items that are not on the agenda. And that will continue, absolutely, for the audience that is in the room. And typically, if there ever is an audience in the room, it's because community members have noticed something on the agenda that piques their curiosity. And so they come and yes, they do have an opportunity to speak to the board. And hopefully we can answer the questions. I understand that people like questions answered immediately. However, if there's a question that is asked that we are unable to answer, it's going to have to be okay. So yes, coming back into the boardroom, it will be, you can sit and there'll be more space for more people. Sit in the audience, raise hand, ask questions. We'll do the best we can. And we will be live streaming with a Zoom format. And I don't know about the engagement with the public. I'm sorry, I thought that's what you meant, Angela.
The setup will be much like it is now, with the Zoom being used as the vehicle to live stream, and you know, it will be people in the room as well as board members who cannot come to the meeting, maybe zooming in, and then participation will probably be determined by, you know, you and the board, you and the superintendent, but usually it's by email in advance or by the 5 minutes before the board, you know, 5 minutes each before the board meeting or whatever. Those rules won't change.
And it will be different than this in that we won't have the little boxes. You know, we're going to have to share the space, so you won't necessarily see board members as clearly as you can at this point. But we have many that are not on camera anyway, so it'll probably be 6 of one, a half dozen of the other. So it'll be what it is.
Okay, I'd like to move on to the next agenda if we could.
Great.
I just want to remind members that 3 policies to be reviewed were attached to the agenda that was sent out last week. And I would also like the public to understand that the policies are on the MSAD11 website under the school board site portion of the website. So, Angela?
Given the content of the June 17th meeting, the ongoing communication since that date and today's meeting, the policies were selected for this agenda for us to review and become familiar with. We'll use a process for reviewing them. But before we do that, I've asked the board chair to clarify the role of the board in relation to curriculum.
Thank you. And there's 5 things that the board are responsible for. 2 of them are setting curriculum and policy. So when it comes to, I was really grateful, first of all, that when the agenda was published, Angela, that you attached policies. And I'm hopeful that the policies that we're speaking about, that the curriculum committee members have read those policies. They're beautifully, beautifully written, very articulately outlining the way that curriculum is developed. The board is responsible for curriculum, but we're not responsible for the boots on the ground in the classroom portion of that, because we're not the experts. We're not teachers. We're not, maybe some of us are teachers. And I know, Nicole, you work for the DOE. However, we have experts that are in the classroom, that are doing the work. And we have a director of curriculum and instruction who is very on top of her game and really working hard to bring us to the best next level for our students. We educate every student. And so when you look at our policies and you look at our curriculum, it's important for board members to remember that it's critical for us to take a seat and to listen, and it's never political. We've had a couple of times when in our conversations of board members, people have mentioned their political party. We need to not do that, because school boards are nonpartisan by design. And that's because we represent children. We are voted for by constituents because children can't vote. Our job is to educate and represent every single child and to be committed to their growth, to their development, to their futures. And with that in mind, we have really well written, frequently visited policies that outline how that work gets done. And we need to follow those policies. And I'm a little concerned that we didn't follow them very well during this process. And I'm hopeful that we can get right back on track, because it really is important that our policies save us. They save us from ourselves, and they save us from making bad decisions for kids. And the reason we are here, front of mind, focal point all the time, is children. What is in the best interest of every single child that is entrusted to us every single day that they are with us? So when we form policies and we form curriculum, that is our focus. Absolutely, 100%. Angela?
Thanks, Becky. So I recognize the time, And I know we have 3 policies. So I thought we would go through a structured process to keep us kind of focused on the 3 policies. I will share my screen so we can also visualize the policies as well as the ones that you probably have before you. It's the same one. I will name it. I'll provide a short introduction of the purpose of the policy and a brief summary. Board members will then be asked to offer clarifying questions. There might be something we haven't, policies go through a really significant review process. So sometimes we don't see these policies unless, something comes up and we need to go look to the policy or it's time for a review. It sort of depends on how the year goes. So we'll have a time for clarifying question. Basically, is there a term in there I don't understand what it means? Let's talk it out. Let's make sure we all come to agreement on that. And then we'll go into questions related to the process built into the policy. Is there something that you wonder about, concerned about, just want to have a little more probing conversation around? And then we'll have a brief open discussion. So just between the board. I'll listen unless I'm being asked to speak. Any comments that can't be attended to at the moment, like can't be responded to at the moment, can be revisited at a future meeting date. I will be taking some notes because this will help us stay on top of what is raised. And we're going to try to do a 10 minutes per policy because you've had ample time to review the policies in advance. And Matt will help with that timekeeping of that rather than me. We recognize some of the policies are shorter and some are longer, so we may need to adjust the time accordingly. So, Becky may sometimes be asked to respond to the questions of policy as well, because she's a longtime member of the board and she is your chair, whereas my tenure in the district is at 3 years. And so there may be some questions that it's more appropriate for her to respond to than me. So I will put the policies up on the screen and we'll go through one at a time. Agenda, I attached them there, so. Okay, let me just see what it looks like. I'll try to make it maybe a little bit bigger. And can I close this thumbnail, Terry? There we go. Okay, it's a little better. And you all have it in front of you. And for members of the public, this is also under MSAD11.org, where it says schools, click, go to school board. A white page will show up. It'll say policies on the left-hand column. Click there. And this one is IGA, curriculum development and adoption. So on this policy is meant to define curriculum and the guiding documents that set local curriculum. So for example, curriculum is a written document that sets forth the learning expectations for all students for all content areas of the main system of learning results. So we follow state legislation. That's one of our guiding documents, main learning results. And within that is the guiding principles of the learning results. So those are the guiding documents. Those are also follow a pretty strict review process at the state level with a significant timeline and a very transparent organization around that and engagement of the public. And then once those are republished, I think like every 10 years, then we need to also attend to adjusting our curriculum to follow suit. So that's this just clarifies what documents we refer to when we're writing our curriculum. And it sets a process for continuous review of curriculum. That's what this policy ensures. I'm going to scroll down a little so you can see that. It's an ongoing process, and then letters A through F identify what that process needs to include to ensure that our curriculum is relevant and transparent with sufficient approval. So that's the brief summary. It's an opportunity. Does anyone have questions? You're not a clarifying question, something like a word doesn't make sense to you, or there's a part of it that doesn't make sense. and you'd like, Becky, are you able to monitor people?
I am, yes. Tony, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. So in full disclosure, I'm chair of the policy committee, and we do have a process. Actually, that Superintendent Hopkins guides us through to make sure we're going through and updating this. And I just wanted to actually clarify the idea we see the on letter D there, it says quote, best practices, end quote. And I just wanted to get a little sense from you, Angela, maybe on what best practices would be. And then for me in policy, I would actually look at why are we putting that in quotes. I feel like best practices as a concept, as a useful concept, and not something that's just a quote, or is not something it sort of reads ironic to me, and that's not really the way I would want to use best practices. I would want to use them as a best practice. So what does best practice mean to you, and what does the quote there mean to you?
That's a great question. I'm not sure why it's in quotes, so I'll answer your question backwards. I'm not sure why it's in quotes, so I don't understand the historical reference that determined that statement. I think I agree with you in terms of best practices is in a way it's a concept. The best practices for one content area may be different from another content area. They are always evolving, and so that might be also part of the rationale. Best practices evolve with neuroscience and ongoing research and development. So the more we learn about how people learn, and in particular how students learn, the more evidence there is available for us to understand the strategies that we should be employing to ensure active engagement of all of our learners and to support students in accelerating their learning or helping them if they're struggling.
Matthew? You're muted.
Sorry. Just to piggyback on Tony's comment, not just these particular policies, but all the others, this type of wording is something that we consistently we address and correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, but we really work on removing that type of language from policies because that type of comment is so vague, right? It's like on a job application and duties and other duties as prescribed, right? I mean, it's very vague. So, you know, when we review this policy, whenever it comes up for review, that's certainly something that we will take into account.
Matt, I think sometimes when I read the phrase advances in knowledge, educational research, and best practice, it could sometimes also be termed advances in knowledge, educational research, and pedagogy. That is the act of instructing, you know, utilizing what we understand about neuroscience and educational research. That might be another way to consider best practices in my understanding of that term.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions?
Thought I saw a hand raised. Did I miss it?
I thought I saw, I think Matt's went up and then went back down.
Okay.
I think that's what that was.
So do we have any other process questions or probing questions about the content of this policy that is first addressing what our guiding documents are, what we refer to when writing curriculum, and second, addressing that there shall be a process, an ongoing process. And then what I do is take this, and as I discussed in my response to the community, there's like a 5-step process that I take from this, map out, I've brought to this committee for review, you've approved it, and annually I bring it back saying, where are we at in this process per content area, per grade span.
Are we going to have open discussion, or is there any anybody interested in open discussion?
If there aren't questions, Matt, you can open for discussion.
Did we want to move on to the next policy, Angela?
Possibly, if there's no discussion further on this matter.
I didn't see any. I haven't seen any hands up. So.
Okay. I will do that. So this particular policy, just for clarification, because I didn't scroll down, it is reviewed routinely, as you can see here, 2012, then 2017. So it'll probably be reviewed next school year again, unless, of course, you wanted to accelerate it because you see something in the policy that concerns you. Usually, Superintendent Hopkins has it on a 5-year cycle. Okay, this is policy IMB. The title is Teaching About Controversial / Sensitive Issues. The purpose of this policy is to clarify the role of controversial issues in learning within schools, to set the conditions in which the issues are raised and discussed, to clarify roles of the community, the teachers, and the students. So all of those aspects are set forth in this policy. There is a preamble to this policy, which clarifies why controversial issues are situated within school settings. And just to scroll through so the public can see, there are elements here. It's the responsibility of the schools to make provisions for study. The students have a set of rights when engaging in study of controversial issues. The teachers have a role to play in handling controversial issues. And there are 6 steps to that. In this one, it has routinely been reviewed, as all our policies have.
Yes, Matthew.
Yeah, this particular policy is actually really important considering most of our policies are student facing, but this one is, to me, particularly important. I just want to ask a quick question or make a quick statement. I know a lot of our policies are reviewed by our attorneys to make sure that they're in accordance with the law and that we aren't violating anybody's rights. I'm kind of curious if this particular policy is something that may have been reviewed by our district attorneys.
So I can answer that one. Maine School Management has a policy person, Charlotte Bates, and she is an attorney, but she doesn't act as an attorney. She is sort of a policy expert, I would say. And so what she does is goes over policies and puts together sample policies and templates that we then receive, and sometimes we word them, change wording a little bit so that it's relevant for us, because it's not always a one size fits all. So yes, and everything that comes out of Maine School Management is aligned to state and federal law. So yes.
Thank you, Becky.
Mm-hmm. Tony?
Thanks. And I appreciate the opportunity to go through, and that these were pulled out, that Angela pulled these out to look at. In looking at this, I noticed that it does kind of address some of the concerns that I heard, that students felt like they couldn't say things to teachers. And I get that that may be challenging in the moment, but we do have a policy in place to make sure that students can express their opinion to the teacher without fear of repercussion. And I do have a question here too, but it just seems like the teachers are also sort of enjoined to really be thoughtful about how they're presenting stuff. So if a teacher's saying, hey, I'm not, this is my opinion, and I'm going to, share it here. They're clear about that. And I think that's one of the points here on policy IMB. I guess I just wanted to double check, what response have we gotten from teachers about this? And I guess I would wonder what students have said, although I don't know how much students are seeing this policy, but any comments from teachers about this process?
So my time is only 3 years in the district, and I could certainly go back and look at notes from other curriculum directors to see if there's a historical record. And I think it's an opportunity to also, for me, to reach out to the principals, both at every level, to see if something's come forth that they have. Oftentimes principals work directly with teachers following policy to ensure, because they know the context of their building, and they also know they have the family relationships. And so I would probably say that that we are aware of this policy and do our best. And I know that the syllabi in all of our courses, that there's a tension. If I especially recall this in like in reviewing syllabi for science and social studies classes as well, that students have rights and teachers have responsibilities, and that there's some space using student-friendly language to support that. Is there an opportunity to review this policy with staff more explicitly? There's always an opportunity, and we can certainly, especially in light of the conversations we've been having this summer, it might be a great opportunity to do that in August when we all return as a staff in a learning community to revisit this and ensure we're all on the same page and we understand not only the policy and its steps, but then how we enact that on a daily basis in our own settings. But I made a note to also see if this is a conversation we should have at the administrative team level where the principals have that ongoing connection. And I think in a way it sort of refers to what Ms. Garat was saying earlier in a couple of the notes that were saying, what is the student perspective? We did hold student there's a name for it, student groups where they could share their experience of learning and what they liked about school and what they didn't. And we made sure there was no authority figure in the room that could unduly influence the students' response. So it was a neutral party having those conversations. Notes were taken, but student identities were removed from that. Some of that information was shared a couple of years ago when we did a big we actually looked at late starts for schools, but in that we also dug into a little more about like, what is the school experience for kids? Something like that was really valuable. I know that we also, the guidance staff does routinely reach out to graduates from Gardner to understand what prepared them well and where did they wish they were better prepared. And maybe those questions could be enhanced.
Angela, I also wonder if it would be helpful for families if we could tag these policies in the student handbook in some way, so that if a student has an issue, or
that's a great question. They probably are tagged in the student handbooks, and maybe I should know that, but because most of our policies are linked into our student handbooks at relevant sections. You know, they're either named or and now in this digital world, actually linked in under certain sections. We do review handbooks every summer to ensure that we are staying up with policy, and that's reflected in the handbook. It's a lot to go through. So that is something that we have routine administrative meetings that start back up in August, and I can also add that note.
Thank you. Teresa had her hand up, but I don't see her.
No, I'm all set, thanks.
Okay, great. Anything else?
So,
Cullen.
Sorry.
Cullen has his hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just quick, because I'm still new to the process. If students do have a complaint against a policy, is their first stop the school board, or is there an internal channel they can direct a grievance or a complaint to?
Just for clarification, Colin, a complaint against a policy or a complaint against a situation they're in that's related to policy?
That is a great nuance. I would suspect a complaint against a situation is more common and is handled by a principal. So I guess I'm asking about a complaint against a policy.
I think if it's a complaint against a policy, they probably follow the same steps that any citizen or community member would follow. that they have the rights as anyone else to raise concerns about policy. And I know we have procedures for raising, which is next under, like if there's a concern about a material selection, there's actually a step-by-step procedure for raising that. And oftentimes concerns about policy are brought, depending on what the policy is, they are brought to the curriculum committee. They're brought to leadership, usually to raise the attention of leadership and see, is it a policy issue, or is it the, sorry, it's taking, I got to work through this in my brain. Is it a policy issue, or is it the implementation of policy that's the challenge?
Yeah.
Because there are two, right? Policies are often kind of goal oriented with some steps. And then the implementation is nuanced, as you suggest. And sometimes we do really well, and sometimes we stumble a little bit, or it's not super clear. If it's implementation, oftentimes that can be ironed out pretty easily within the school or the leadership structure. If it's the policy itself, that's a barrier. Raising it to the attention of the administrator is a really good step, and also partnering with an administrator, but not necessarily needing to bring it, to ask for it to be on an agenda. And if it's about teaching and learning, usually start at the curriculum committee. So the board members of the curriculum committee can look at that policy with those who are raising that. Then if it's reviewed and there's further discussion and it seems like an appropriate next step is to adjust the policy, and it's not the practice side of it, then that will then often get edited and reviewed and voted and brought to the policy committee. The policy committee then goes through that process, and then it's brought to the full board for the first review and then the second review. And Becky, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Nope, you got it.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a great answer. I just wanted to be sure that we had the appropriate amount of open channels for that sort of up and down information, because when people get frustrated, they go sideways.
Yeah, I get that.
And honestly, our hope is the school board is the last stop, because that means when you get to the school board, that means nothing else has worked. And so our hope as a school board is that all the underpinnings are strong enough and working well enough that the school board is the last stop. So hopefully that's helpful.
Becky, we're up against we're actually exceeding our 10 minutes here, just throw that out there. That's all.
Oh, okay. Teresa has her hand up, and then we'll move along. That's okay. Thank you.
Thanks. So my question was, is there a protocol for the students to go through if they have a complaint about a teacher?
Yes, there absolutely is. That's in the next policy, Teresa. There is absolutely a process. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep. And I believe it's also in the student's handbook.
Yes. So Matt, carry on. You're muted.
Sorry. Is there any open discussion required for this particular policy? I think we've probably covered all bases for this one. So, in saying that, I think we could probably move on to policy IJJ. Angela.
Okay. Okay. So IJJ is the instructional and library media material selection policy. It's pretty lengthy. It's intended to ensure that a process exists for making instructional materials available and ensuring that materials are routinely maintained, current, and accurate. This policy also makes statements that guide the school community in the rights of the parents related to the use of instructional material and identifies a process that needs to be followed when material is challenged. So just to ensure that this is visible, again, it's on the website. The preamble is here, sort of outlining the roles and responsibilities and at what level. There is an expectation that the responsibility is on the staff following the instructional objectives. That the materials routinely reviewed, that it can be multiple types of material. So we're not speaking just about hardcover texts, but print, multimedia, digital, informational technology. That the certified library media specialist is responsible for overseeing library media program. We have 2 certified library media specialists in the district. They oversee the whole K-12 library resource material. That's also part of instructional resources. And then this particular policy actually has definitions built into it as to what are materials and what are resources. And then there are objectives and criteria for the selection of said materials. This letters A through J, yes, A through J. I don't know if I make it a tiny bit smaller, you can see it all on one screen. This is a criteria that we routinely revisit when selecting instructional materials. And when bringing any instructional materials for like core curriculum to the curriculum committee for review, there's we use a review process, and I outline all the steps that integrate these aspects, and those are made available to the curriculum committee and shared during a public meeting. And then there are procedures for the selection. And that in here, this is actually for people who are paying attention to the budget. This is really important that we always do this audit of what we currently have and how that works based on what is current, accurate, so on and so forth. So that's part of our year 2 of our curriculum review cycle for every content area. The library has a little bit different cycle, but the same procedures. There is something in here about donated materials and how we manage those. This is where the parental authority is. So there's a step-by-step process there. And then if materials are to be challenged, even there may be occasional materials, here's a complaint is made, and it doesn't identify who has to be the complainant. So it can be a student. So it's first heard by the person providing the materials in question. So oftentimes that's a teacher is the first course of action. So that's what we discussed last month. And then it goes to the principal. And then we have a challenge form. If the conversation doesn't feel resolved, there's an instructional and library media materials challenge form that's on the website. It's actually right underneath this policy and it's linked. That gets filled out and sent to the principal and then forwarded to the superintendent. And then we should have a review committee, and it outlines who should be on that. So this is much like, this letter C is much like what happened prior to the June 17th board meeting. And then you go into letter D and you actually go through the process. The letter E, then the committee gets the materials go to either me if I'm not part of the committee or the superintendent. A final decision is made. And then if that decision still isn't resolved, if that doesn't resolve the concern, then you, as Becky said, it's the last resort, then you go to the full board. And you go through a series of steps with the full board. And then there is a timeline that's established, and the decision does not have to be made in the board meeting. There can be time for the board to deliberate, as publicly, of course, and then write a response by the end of the next board meeting, when board meetings are typically held monthly, except for in the summer. This has its legal reference and the routine revisions. Are there questions?
Yes, Teresa.
So under C4,
Okay, hang on, I gotta catch up. Is it down below, Teresa?
it just says the teacher does not use the classroom as a personal forum. So getting back to last month's meeting where one of the students was at the prom, one of the seniors, and sent in photos of Mr. Walker having his own private prom for his son. How was that handled? We never heard any more about that.
A couple things. First, we can only talk about things that are on the agenda. So I'm going to let Becky handle that part. 2, C4 is the policy, just for the public's sake. I'm just catching up to you, Teresa. C4 is page 2 of the policy we just concluded, teaching about controversial and sensitive issues, not the policy on the screen at the moment. I'll scroll back and let Matthew and Becky manage the meeting.
So that email that we received, Teresa, that will be managed by the superintendent. The staff works for the superintendent. The superintendent works for us. So we may never know what happens with that situation. It's not our job to know that, because if, excuse me, if it's necessary, I'm so sorry, I have a frog. If it's necessary for the board to take an action, we need to act as a judge and a jury. So we need to not have information more than what we received. And I personally, I think it's on the one hand, it was good that we were made aware. On the other hand, it's unfortunate because we don't know the full story, but it's not our job to know that, and we really can't know that. What I can tell you is, and I don't know what's been done, but I know the superintendent is doing what is her job to do, and that she's working with the building administrator of that building, and that they will come to a conclusion, and that we may never know. And that's really how that works. Does that
Thank
help?
you. Yep. Thank you, Becky.
Sure. Tony? You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So yeah, just had a question on IJJ, the one that we were on, and I'm grateful for the chance to review policy in this way. I appreciate the work that I do and that the policy committee does to kind of keep the gears moving, right, of the district. But to see that we have these policies in place that do define how, again, how content is selected, and that there is a process for parents to be involved. And so just to reinforce that families can have confidence that whatever they're sharing with their kids they can continue to do that. I guess, Angela, and going through the challenge materials piece, I guess, I'm curious as what, it looks like there's a written report that happens, and I don't know where that goes. Was that generated? So actually a review committee was formed before the special board meeting?
So Becky referenced earlier that sometimes we stumble a little in following policies, and it is our job to follow them, the board's job, our job, and we work very, very hard to always do that. It was a really long year, and we were on the very last day of a teacher workshop day when all of this became a little intense, and we went from memory rather than from going back and reading the official policy. So we followed most of the steps as we should have. So the complaint did get heard. Didn't necessarily follow A and B, but it generally got heard. By the Tuesday of that week, 14th, I think, 15th, somewhere around there, I had spoken with the department chair and the principal. And then by the next morning, we had a group, and the group consisted, the department chair was not available. So the group consisted of the principal, a guidance counselor who was also a former AP teacher, our gifted and talented teacher who is also an advanced placement teacher, a number of the teachers from the committee, the library media specialist, myself. I feel like there was one more person, and that might have been the community member, but I can't remember. And we went through very thoroughly. It took quite a long time in our meeting, and it was a virtual meeting, where we went through the complaint, we went through the instructional materials, we went through the AP course guide, looking very carefully at what we're required to do, and compared that with the current summer assignment. We went through the scope and sequence for the entire year to understand where the summer assignment fit within the scope and sequence of the year. We went through the process that was set forth by the educators around and the library media specialists along selection of materials, and all of that was reviewed. And then that was shared. The principal and I then brought that to the superintendent. I think the part that wasn't officially done was a lengthy written report. So there was an email outlining the steps, and then conversation following that entire process. And then that was brought to the result of that was brought to the board for the well, it wasn't an emergency meeting. It was a special board meeting that was already set forth to adopt the budget that the voters had approved. But we sent out a revised agenda prior to that meeting to ensure that there was a space on the agenda so that we could bring this forward to the board. So we were close. We definitely can learn from reviewing policy. So here, E, you bring it to the superintendent. Mm-hmm. The material shall not be removed until there's a final decision. And then this is where the board meeting comes into play. And I know there's some confusion about whether or not the list was removed. What was changed was the process in which the students could select a text. The list still remains as a reference point, but it is not the sole list that students are asked to choose from. They're asked to choose texts that meet the criteria established in the course. They can certainly refer to that list if they choose, but they are not required to do so.
Okay, thank you. So that written report would have been submitted to the board, is that?
To the superintendent.
To the superintendent.
Yep,
and then,
I can go back to that. It goes to the superintendent, forwarded to the superintendent and director of curriculum, who will then go back to the initial person who made the complaint. And then if that wasn't a satisfactory review, then the person who made the complaint could then go to the board to ask for a part of a board meeting to review for the purpose of receiving testimony from representatives of the various points of view. we sort of jumped to that step a little bit in some parts. We did review testimony from various points of view. And then as you saw in tonight's public comments, that some people didn't feel like they were informed of this complaint prior to the 17th and learned about it afterward because of the newspaper article. And so that this public space was created to ensure that there was a opportunity for continued narrative of all points of view.
Okay. I'm curious, is there a restriction on who can appeal that decision?
The review committee's decision may be appealed to the MSAD11. So, you mean, does it have to be a student of the class or a member of the MSAD11 community or?
Yeah.
I don't know that answer. Becky, do you?
Well, no, I don't know that answer. And honestly, if there was, I feel as though we were really put up against an uncomfortable wall last month. And while I respect the community's wishes to be a part of what we're doing, it really is important that our students are our focus. And if you raise a good point, Tony, if there are complaints from the community from people who don't have students in the class or even students in the school, I'm not sure what to do with that exactly. That's a question for the superintendent.
I mean, I think as long as I think we should probably seek consultation, but I also think that our work is to be public and transparent. And so as long as there's also an opportunity to follow the steps, which starts with in this particular instance, it starts with the teacher. In many instances it will, because that's where the concern will initiate, because that's where the students are learning and engaging in material. That might not always be the case.
And the AP list is different every year. The selection of materials is different every year, as we were told. And Angela, we spoke earlier. I was concerned that is all of our curriculum online, so that people can see what it is that we're doing, not just with this one class, but with math, with science, with PE, with band.
I am working very hard at getting everything online. When I came into the district, we did not have everything codified in such a way that it would be most effective to show it online. And so we always follow the state learning results, and those are prescribed by grade level or grade span. And we are always doing that for absolutely certain. And then what I'm trying to do is routinely go through this cycle and get everything up to date and published. So as soon as I have time this summer, I will be updating further more content areas online so that anyone can view and see that more easily. And I really am working as fast as I can at doing that.
It was not my intention to put you on the spot.
No, I know, but it is our goal.
Yes, and I just more wanted the public to know, those that are watching to know that we really are intending to be very transparent. And how would you know what our curriculum is? How would anyone know unless you have a student? We don't have a method of publishing for the public every piece of our curriculum that we present.
Well, and like daily lesson plans, that's
No.
part of a district curriculum document, but certainly more detailed than the learning results provides a lot of detail, but the ways in which that's organized and the instructional supports that are materials that are made available to support that is our goal, to get that as public and accessible through the MSAD11 curriculum website as possible. And so we've made a great deal of progress in the last year. I will be making a great deal of progress, hopefully this summer, as soon as I can. I think, Matt, you have a couple people with questions,
Teresa.
including yourself.
Yes, Teresa first and then Matthew.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks. So following like with the people that write in and whatnot, I'm just wondering why we would read letters that are from people that don't even live in our community.
Because they were published to the board, and that anything the board receives in such a manner is a public document. That's why they were read.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I mean, as far as I know, there's no policy that says otherwise. So that was the guidance I had.
Matthew?
So, Angela, I just wanted to point out for the public that when we go over curriculum in these committee meetings and eventually take it to the board for budget approval, there's a cost associated with each part of the curriculum that we actually recommend be approved. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Angela, but could you give us a ballpark number as to what our most recent approved budget consisted of for curriculum?
Yes, but that will, I need to have some clarification on that.
Okay, all right. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
To
But I
save,
think it's
okay,
important.
to save the taxpayers dollars, we decided in looking at the curriculum review cycle and the adoption of selected materials, we decided to utilize this opportunity in the use of federal funding that came through. And it's actually such a blessing because the federal funding is designed to address this issue of learning loss, right? COVID created all kinds of challenges for us in meeting the needs of students, and we worked really hard to try to keep the students progressing as we hope. But we also recognized in that process, we didn't always have the most relevant up-to-date materials to do so, or consistent equitable materials across the district to do so. And we were in the process of revising curriculum. So following the federal guidelines, we are able to request that some of those curriculum material costs, which honestly, folks, is significant. Anytime, I mean, if you go buy a book at a bookstore, it's like $20, right? And then you think about 2,000 students. So that's what's going on here. And so we did redirect as many funds as were allowable by federal guidelines and approvable by the state oversight committee, namely our English language arts curriculum, which is not part of the AP materials, just to be clear. AP is its own thing in the College Board. This is the materials that we'll have going forward to really help with phonics, phonemic awareness, learning how to read, reading, shifting into reading to learn, book conversations, those sorts of things, so that we can have some consistent experiences across the district. We also decided you can purchase these materials with licenses, and licenses are usually like an annual cost, and those are not inexpensive. And so what we decided to do is purchase longer term licenses at one price so that it won't go on to the local budget. So we're saving taxpayers dollars. So the English language arts materials for kindergarten through 8th grade, inclusive of all the texts that students would need their hands on, independent reading texts, level text for teachers to teach to, textbooks for students to have in their hands, and materials for teachers, and the online resources is $122,000. That's for English. Usually what we do, like at the middle school level, when you're thinking about, let's say, the social studies adoption of the new textbook, that's usually for a 6-year license. It's usually about $50,000 for 6 years for grades 6 through 8. And you pay it once, and then you don't pay again for 6 years. And we also tried to shift that into federal funds so that the local budget wouldn't absorb that cost. So if I give you, I don't actually have the exact.
That's a great over.
Yeah.
the process, and I appreciate that.
And
I just-
every one of those materials we purchase goes through the curriculum committee first.
Right, exactly. And I just kind of wanted to circle back and point that out. So thank you for pointing that out. Thank you.
Teresa, your hand is raised.
Angela, I just want to thank you for being as frugal as you are, because a lot of people aren't, and I just like-minded people, and I appreciate that.
Well, I grew up with that a lot, so I worked really hard at doing that. But also, I will say that our district has, coming into this district, it was made very clear to me that we both value students and we need to be very, very conscientious of where every one of our dollars goes. And that it's important to utilize, our grant funds as best as we possibly can. There is no fluff, I would say. And I've worked in a lot of places. There in this district, I would say we do the best we can do for every single student. And I don't think our students, in the long run, are lacking for the instructional materials they'll need. But we work really hard at doing that in the most efficient way possible.
Okay, I think we're up against time, so I'd like to try to move on. If we have no open discussion, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item.
Great.
Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing this then, Matt.
Okay, great, thank you. So the next item on our agenda will help us prepare for our next curriculum committee meeting. While Angela and I will meet to set the agenda before posting it publicly, I'd like to take note of areas where board members feel there's an opportunity for a deeper dive, more focus, or a chance to respond to some lingering questions that were raised in today's meeting. And Angela and I will take that into account when we meet. Becky?
The curriculum committee has a charge to understand the policies related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Additionally, the committee is charged with reviewing the plan from the director of curriculum and instruction related to the curriculum review process, the instructional materials selection process, and the reports around assessment. And I think I'm missing a page, Angela.
Well, I can jump in and say it's also achievement. I can say it's assessment. And I know that the one other thing that I'm charged with is the student achievement data results.
Yes.
And then you also manage the budget as a team. So I guess that's the charge of that committee.
It is, and I cannot emphasize enough the importance of knowing our policies. It's dry. It's not fun reading, but I really enjoyed reading these policies for this meeting today and refreshing myself because they're really well written and they're thoughtfully done. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of that and our role in setting curriculum and how those two walk hand in hand. And Angela, we are so fortunate that we have you as our director of curriculum and instruction, but also that we have Andrea, who is such a financial genius when it comes to helping us pull pennies from different places to make sure that the dollars can add up to greatness. Because again, there is no fluff. And we've been saying that ever since I was elected the first time to the board. There is no fluff in MSAD11, but there is a tremendous amount of commitment to be sure that our students have as much as we can provide that they want and everything that they need so that they can have beautiful, magical futures from here. Matt, I'll give it back to you.
Okay, so three things that I kind of like to point out real quick is, so just to close out before we adjourn, I'd like to say that given the meeting, given the topics we've talked about, the district isn't teaching critical race theory. We are not developing curriculum to teach critical race theory. And furthermore, there isn't a plan to do so. And we haven't spent a dime of taxpayer money in any effort to do so. So I just wanted to point that out because there were a few letters, if I remember correctly, that spoke specifically to taxpayer dollars going to CRT. And that's simply just not true. And I hope this meeting dispels some of the assumptions that some folks have made. I make plenty of them, trust me. I try not to, but I do. I'm human just like everybody else. So with that, I'd like to call our meeting to an end. The next meeting will be held on Tuesday, July 27th from 4:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. And will be live streamed. Any public comment is welcome. Comments can be emailed to schoolboard@msad11.org by Monday, July 26th at 4 p.m. I'll say that again, schoolboard@msad11.org by Monday, July 26th at 4 p.m. So this meeting is officially adjourned at, can't see the clock, 7:05 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Matthew, thanks so much. Angela, thank you. And Terry for being here as well. Thank you.
Appreciate everybody attending.
Good night.
Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks. Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone.
Good night.